Thanks for watching Endgame Economics. If you enjoyed this video, hit subscribe. It's completely free for you, and it helps us continue making more videos like this.
All right, let's just jump right into this explainer. Today, we're looking at the grim reality of a high-growth sector. We're going to analyze an industry with recurring revenue, almost zero overhead, and honestly, incredible margin discipline. But here's the catch. The ultimate product in this supply chain is human beings. We are going to break down exactly how kidnapping in Nigeria evolved into a highly efficient, multi-million-dollar corporate machine. To really wrap your head around the scale of this, consider this staggeringly massive number, 48 billion naira. That was the total ransom demand made across Nigeria between July 2024 and June 2025. It's an entire economy operating completely in the shadows, yet it's moving capital that rivals legitimate national industries. But there is a deeply horrifying human reality behind all those financial demands. 4,722. That's the exact number of people abducted in that single year. We're talking about nearly 5,000 lives turned into literal collateral across 997 separate incidents, all just to generate those massive demands. So here's how we're going to break this down. First, the business of abduction. Second, origins and expansion. Third, kidnapping unit economics. Fourth, the terror merger. And finally, the policy trap.
All right, Section 1, the business of abduction.
For this first part, I kind of want you to view this crisis purely through the clinical, rational lens of business mechanics. Because honestly, that is exactly how the perpetrators view it. Research firms like SBM Intelligence point out that these criminal groups operate literally just like corporations. It's a high-growth sector with incredibly reliable recurring revenue streams. From a logistics standpoint, the kidnappers actually treat victims as self-loading cargo. Think about it. Humans transport themselves, which completely eliminates the heavy transport costs you'd get from stealing cattle or moving stolen goods. And shockingly, they've even figured out how to protect their profit margins against a volatile, high-inflation economy.
Moving right along to Section 2, Origins and Expansion.
Now, this nationwide network didn't just magically appear out of thin air, right? It was meticulously scaled over 2 decades. Back in 2006, the business model was really invented down in the southern Niger Delta swamps, and it specifically targeted foreign oil executives. Well, the government responded in 2009 with a massive amnesty program, essentially paying militants to stop. But that accidentally taught the whole country a dangerous lesson. Violence actually forces the state to pay up. By 2011, this model was franchised to the vast, unpoliced forests of the Northwest by cattle rustlers who realized, hey, humans are far more profitable to steal than cows. And then, in 2014, the Chibok mass abductions proved that grabbing dozens of soft targets all at once yielded maximum leverage.
But, scaling any operation requires capital, and Zamfara State's informal gold mining created this absolutely critical self-funding mechanism. Wealthy local elites actually started hiring armed bandits as private security to guard their illegal gold fields. Naturally, those bandits then layered an extortion tax right on top of the miners. So they effectively built this massive, heavily armed protection racket funded entirely by gold. That gave them the capital and the muscle way before the mass kidnapping business even hit its peak.
Which brings us to Section 3, Kidnapping Unit Economics.
Okay, time to open the books and look at the actual math and logistics driving this multi-million-dollar operation. Remember that 48 billion naira anchor demand we mentioned earlier? Well, compare that to the actual collection, just 2.57 billion naira. Now, a 5.3% collection rate sounds absolutely terrible for a legitimate business. But here's the crucial point. Those massive initial demands are strictly theater. They are just an anchoring pricing strategy used in negotiations. I mean, if a gang demands 30 billion naira initially, suddenly paying a few million to get your family back feels like a bargain. It's a remarkably dark psychological sales tactic.
And this brilliantly, if darkly, illustrates the cold rationality of the kidnappers. Indexation. As the Nigerian naira lost value, the kidnappers didn't panic. No, they simply reinvented the corporate cost of living adjustment straight from a forest camp. By artificially inflating their naira demands, they made sure that the equivalent US dollar value of their ransom take remained perfectly stable. They are functionally managing their entire criminal enterprise for inflation. You see, the supply chain of a mass abduction is a meticulously planned operation. It is not just random chaos. It kicks off with detailed intelligence and reconnaissance to find soft targets that have clean escape routes. Then comes the raid, which usually involves these terrifying swarms of motorcycles hitting remote targets at like 2 a.m. And finally, the commercial phase kicks in. And get this, They don't just use burner phones. Kidnappers have literally been reported giving actual bank account details for wire transfers, acting with total, absolute confidence that the financial system just won't catch them.
We need to drop the business facade for a second here to really somberly acknowledge the profound human catastrophe of the school's pivot. Kidnappers realize that the highest leverage hostage isn't some oil executive, it's a child in a classroom. Raiding a school yields dozens of captives all at once. The victims obviously can't fight back. Their families will sell absolutely everything they own to save them, and the government is publicly humiliated. It's a ruthlessly calculated strategy optimizing for maximum leverage and publicity at the absolute minimum operational cost.
Now, you'll often hear governments use a very specific, carefully crafted phrase, back-channel negotiations. Whenever victims are released, this bureaucratic euphemism gets deployed. It's used specifically to hide the reality of ransom payments, because as we're going to see in a second, paying a ransom is actually a criminal offense in Nigeria right now. The state literally cannot admit out loud how these children are getting home.
Let's dive into Section 4, the terror merger.
This right here is the chilling M&A equivalent of the crisis, where profit-driven syndicates actually merge with ideological extremists. To anchor your understanding of this merger, just look at this shocking number, 766 million naira. In 2024, a high court judge in Borno State was abducted. His kidnappers demanded this exact massive amount, and they received it down to the very last naira. And according to SBM intelligence, Boko Haram pocketed. A sitting judge was essentially converted into a massive capital injection for a globally recognized terrorist organization.
Basically, the legal and operational lines have completely collapsed. On one side, you've got the Northwest Bandits, who started off as cattle-rustling mercenaries strictly in it for the cash. On the other side, you've got the Northeast jihadists, like Boko Haram, who are entirely driven by ideology and terror. But today, they share tactics, they share recruits, and the ransom money absolutely funds both. The Nigerian government even went so far as to formally designate the bandits as terrorists in 2022. The line between the mercenary and the jihadists simply no longer exists.
And finally, Section 5, the policy trap. So the government has obviously made desperate attempts to regulate and destroy this market, but they've tragically backfired. In 2022, lawmakers passed a law making it a felony to pay a ransom. And hey, the whiteboard logic is airtight, right? Ban ransoms, choke off the revenue, stop the crime. But the grim reality is that desperate families are always going to pay to save their children. Always. So the market just goes invisible. It moves to untraceable channels. The state loses absolutely all intelligence on where the money is flowing. And ultimately, the victims are the ones who end up getting punished.
Let's break down how this actually works in practice. The law makes paying a ransom a felony, punishable by up to 15 years in prison. Just think about the outcome for a desperate parent for a second. Your child is taken, the security forces can't reach them, so you do what anyone would do. You sell your home to pay the kidnappers. Under this law, you are now a felon facing 15 years in prison just for saving your child's life. Threatening victims doesn't stop the crime at all. It just guarantees that absolutely no one will ever tell the police what's really happening.
SBM Intelligence hits the nail on the head and summarizes the core takeaway beautifully. You don't beat an economic problem with a criminal justice slogan. Fighting a deeply entrenched, highly profitable, inflation-indexed industry requires tracing the actual bank accounts that are being openly used. It requires stabilizing the economy and, crucially, creating jobs for the massive pool of unemployed young men who currently look at raiding as their most viable career option. Blunt laws just don't fix broken plumbing.
Which leaves us with a final, pretty provocative question. As long as the naira falls and poverty grows, can any law actually stop an industry built entirely on economic desperation? It's an incredibly stark reminder that if we genuinely want to dismantle a criminal enterprise, we've got to look past the surface symptoms. We have to address the underlying macroeconomic conditions that make it so terribly profitable in the first place. Think about that for a bit, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.